Alrighty, I think we will get started. As people trickle in, they may have missed introductions, but not the good stuff at the center. Welcome. Here we go. Well, sorry, one more person. I'm doing my two jobs. Oh, okay. There, Danica did a job. Thank you. We split these jobs up sort of willy-nilly, and sometimes we both don't do things. So welcome to Copperhead season. It's Copperhead season number 4. Since the first one, this is the closest we've been back near the actual Copperhead seasons. We're about a month out from baby Copperheads emerging from whatever they emerge from. I don't know if we're any Copperhead experts here, but our motto is just that it's Copperhead season somewhere. So tonight we're in our collaborative reading series, which we sort of have pooled from signers up. We're going to have Lindsey Webb and Karen Rigby, both with brand new and wonderful books out that afterwards, or even during, honestly, in a side window, you should be buying and getting yours on the way. But yeah, a little bit just to back up, the reading series started last summer in the heat of Copperhead season, and we've been going strong ever since. Our readers are sort of set up. They exchange work and ideas. They decide themselves how they want to collaborate and what they want to show for it when the time comes, as it has come now for Lindsey and Karen. I'll say we'll post in the chat at some point a link that we'll get to. It'll be a sign-up link. If you're interested in potentially reading in a future iteration, we can hopefully make that happen. With only a little bit of further ado, the specific ado being, we also have a tradition of getting things started with a snake story. Today's snake story is going to come from reader Lindsey Webb, and Lindsey, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Jace. This happened to me last summer in Montana. I found a garter snake crawling on me while reading in the grass near a lake. I thought someone had taken a rope and cast it somehow over my body. And I think snakes must be very clumsy if they feel so much like a cast rope.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsey. Thanks to Danica for being the pilot, co-pilot at times. It rotates. And thanks to both our readers. The link to sign up, if you're interested, is in the chat now. And the format is going to be ombre effect. There was some debate about pronunciation, but I think we landed on ombre. Lindsey's going to start reading from her book, transition to collaboration. Karen's going to move in with a collaboration and then sort of fade out with a reading from the new book on the other side. And then we will, did I pronounce it with an H? Okay.
No, you did. You pronounced it correctly. I was just specifying
okay.
for the audience members.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
Like I thought maybe I said like a hard H or something, which would be something entirely, yeah. So that'll be the format, and then feel free to hang out a little bit at the end for some informal questions and answers, or you can make them formal if you'd like. But that's all I've got. Danica, have I forgotten anything, as I am prone to do?
No, that was rad. We're gonna read Lindsey's bio and then Karen's bio, and then we'll go into the reading. And yeah, thanks to Karen and Lindsey for being great sports, and again, just like get their rad books. Yeah, if you want to read Lindsey's bio, then I'll read Karen's.
Yeah, I'm posting Lindsey's bio as we speak. So Lindsey Webb is the author of Plat from Archway Editions, out now, and perhaps in bookstores near you, depending on where you are and whether there are bookstores near you. Also the author of the chapbooks Perfumer's Organ from Above Ground and House from Ghost Proposal. Her writings have appeared in Chicago Review, Denver Quarterly, Jubilat, and Lana Turner, among others. With Kylan Rice, she edits Thirdhand Books, and I believe there's a book coming soon, pre-orderable from Thirdhand Books, so keep an eye out for that. Links to all of those great things in the chat.
Okay, I'm going to drop Karen's bio and links as well. And then I will read Karen's bio. Karen Rigby is the author of Chinoiserie, which came out from Asada Press in 2012, and Fabulosa, just out in June from Jackleg Press. Karen is a National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow, and she lives in Arizona. Karen was also one of my very first creative writing teachers when I was in undergrad, and continues to be a wonderful inspiration and mentor. So thank you, Karen. That's my own personal part of the bio. Let's welcome Lindsey to get us started. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Danica. Thanks, Jace. And thanks, Karen. I'm really excited to read in general, and I'm extremely grateful and excited about the collaboration. And I guess I will have more to say about that when I get there. But I'm going to start by reading a little bit from my new book, Plat. And I'm going to read from the first section, which is called Garden. And there's not a whole lot to know about it beyond that they are sort of in little prose blocks or chunks. And I will sort of be skipping around a little bit. Yeah, so here we go. Before you died, I confused the personal with the ecological, die with die. Now I hold my mouth to the mouth of a tree and blow. Was I died here too, or did I born? I call the rabbits whatever comes into my head, though a pearly vapor rolls beneath the real, deep fur behind a name. The garden is not a nightmare. It hallucinates itself each season. Where's my dream and where's my cultivation, death or capital? I remember Weed Killer was born of a man's desire, so I can't address my femininity in a garden. Too expensive. A $20 barrette at the corner of my face, a freak double-headed rose. Here, every flower might be a rose. The garden builds up the natural exactly as fast as it disintegrates. I read in my exercise book that with enough practice, one can access the overtone sequence, in which each frequency is an integer multiple of a fundamental. Guitar music, violin music, there must be a quicker door. But this entire place aspires to allegory. The catalpa, too, with help from the fugitive wind, has decided to escape its plot. Everywhere I plant theories about your death, they come up several months later, sticky and rotting from the inside with motive. An apple tree painted on the wall looks like a plan. I walk over as if to confront illustration. I pretend to cup the fruit in my hand and pull it back, pluck it from the tree, lift it into the third dimension. I drop it by relaxing my fingers. But the red fruit remains an argument kept closely to the wall, still red. My reply is overdrawn, and I reach out, attempt to pay again. Winter comes to the garden, then fall, then summer. Hours construct themselves exactly as fast as they disintegrate. I came here to read and speculate, but forgot how I got in. Ants imply distance to cover. Death implies time has gone on without you. I should start over. Maybe I'll go into real estate. You place your finger lightly on a string, and the garden hits a different octave. I put on a face like a window and walk around the Plat. I'm waiting for the northern cardinal to catch his reflection in my countenance, to wear himself out fighting it. The garden tells its lie of isolation. Nature has died and the garden is its memory. A cool blanket of irrigation pools in the corners of each leaf. Ghosts and rabbits, horned lizards, carpenter ants organize their respective diplomatic anarchism. I take a different path, almost running, disturbed by all the roses facing forward, as if I'd set them out myself. When we were younger, I complained I had no sisters. You, taller and prettier, turned your darker hair around a finger. In a silly voice, you said, "Remember, I'm your sister." Older, I forgot. I forget her. I dig, mulch, prune, and fertilize. I don't dig, mulch, prune, and fertilize. I grow you, I die you. In my dream, I visit a time before your death when nature generated itself from a spool of tiny spirals, little white berries. I'm told the garden is wherever the righteous are, or vice versa. So at the felled catalpa, I follow a vein of pollen, adopt a mastic attitude. I eat something that looks delicious but has no taste. Meanwhile, over my shoulder, a young woman sucks at the sap of a tree, bending as if permanently cast that way, shrouded in the blue light of archetype. Even in shadow, the garden's washed and washed with color until it glows with a special kind of light, as if radiating from the category itself. They tell me the garden's synonym, beauty. I say the right word is worms. They tell me to find a happy medium. I say the garden has no medium because it is not common. I mean, not held in common. What I don't say is that it keeps its fugitive unknowns beneath the topsoil. Its medium is elsewhere, cherished as a lost species. At the split leaf philodendron, I turn left. Even the wilderness has us in it as its offstage opposite. The garden is not an allegory. It aspires to curl out. You told me you wanted to be buried young and beneath some tree. When you died, the world turned sketchy, as I mistakenly thought the garden brooked no death. I forgot the coyote head, trapped face up in the grate, washed there by the spring floods, suspended by the jaw. And me too. I say I will uncapture, but I eat and eat. Okay. So I'm going to read just a few more poems, and these are poems that I wrote. 3 of the 4 I'm going to read are poems I wrote in conversation with Karen's incredible new book. You all should buy it. It's beautiful. And I was feeling a little strange after my book came out, mostly just like not sure what to write or how I wanted to write, if I wanted to keep going in the exact same vein, if I wanted to sort of have a radical break. And I wanted to challenge myself to work more with rhyme and sound, because it's something I've always felt sort of like not good at, and I wanted to practice. And so I was doing that in the winter and like not feeling great about it. And I got pregnant and I like was feeling really sick. And so I was like not writing hardly at all. And so this collaboration came at a perfect time because it was like, now I have homework. I actually have to write something. I have to do this. And it was great because I was able to go back to those, that initial kind of experimental mode and like challenge myself to revisit it with Karen's amazing words as sort of my guide a little bit. And there is anyway, you'll see, I guess, as I read, but one of Karen's recurring images is gloves. And for whatever reason, that was one thing that I really kind of was very productive for me. So here are some glove poems. The first one is one that I wrote in the winter, and then the next three are after Karen's poems. So this first one is A Cloud in Theory. Tasking the windows, the wind blows. Wintering, the row of windows goes into, then below your look, down to your book. You frown. Shook by the sound, I look around your look, down to your hands, still inked from your pen. When will I tell you I think there's a white cloud inside me, full of our future, yet not yet a whole? What storm will it hold? What form? And will you still love me if everything changes? Even this still room, your glove dropping like a till into some unknown soil. The window flirts with blowing in. The night glows in some momentary birth, and the cloud leaps up at the sound. As glove. The roses are edged with bruises, and I'm a set of fuses, ledges, sore, with new edges. Oh, rose, thou art sick, and the poets are stricken, pregnant, slick inside, and newly thick. I'll forget all this, I'm told. I'll pick a different rose. Lift a gloved hand to touch one's nose. I read, an ungloved hand props up the other gloved hand. Glove I am, propping up a hand, puppet to a little man. He socks me, sickens me, kicks me in the cervix. It's not his fault, it's his living, bruises me. Rosy boy beneath my sleeve, I gave him living, all my fault, yet I regret less and less. This is enantiomorph. You summarize symmetry with a gesture. Two hands pressed together. A simple transfer of one glove explains the issue. No true sympathy exists. There's a missing dimension. Ears are like this, you say, and crystals. Remnant, garment, spirals spin in one direction. Geometry and the genetic code know something similar, the mirror. It watches a woman enter a room to look at her hands, a black glove, a symmetry that won't map. And this is the last one, called Emerald in Theory. The future is cut on the bias, fastened with diamonds, furred shut. The future fills the bodice, slashed at the back in a V. Actual sharpness, it walks backwards. Game for a future where a green dress pools, foolish to game the future, to fiddle with its hem. But unfailingly I hear, you will be blank. Your child will be blank. While the bias cut emerald so cinched, it pinches time, minces backwards and up. No matter how I mutter, what I ask, foolishly meting out meat and bone, moment from moment, I miss and miss. A fool I once claimed the freedom to choose 100 endings, but here's just one, green, on its way, and I don't know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsey, for your wonderful work, and to Jace and Danica and me. Now, I was in a similar place as Lindsey was. I had just finished my second collection, and I had some work that I had been trying to complete on my own, but it didn't seem to be going where I wanted it to go. And then at that point, I read Lindsey's, which opened a doorway for me. So it's kind of a drafting process I'll start by reading my work, and then you'll start hearing where Lindsey's lines enter into it. So this poem is called Arc Shot, which takes its inspiration from the film term, where you often have a subject who's staying still, but the camera is circling around the subject. In this case, the subject is a teenage girl. Arc shot. Because it's easier to spit a cherry stem clear of the ground's sloped pitch, grass hardening in dry heat, or to look past chain link, than to go back to the girl beginning to lift her sweater behind the junior high band building, because the girl pressing skin to concrete is 14, and me, I'd rather bracket her delicate navel with both hands than let her wait for the slick of a boy's tongue, mistaking touch for the ghost of nobody's love, mistaking his name for answers. But she doesn't stop. It's the start of a mise unseen. She's learned to yield to someone else's loneliness. In poet Ricardo Miro's Wild Country, Arrowed with Gold, where the sun comes to lose its heart, it's the end of childhood and the beginning of razoring everything. The boy's blank face, the slant at midday, the sweater was aquamarine. What could I say now to the girl that I was, without fear or tenderness? The body in exile is never as safe as the body at home. 2. A girl's mind runs riot as fuchsia. No codex for aguacero, no word for flood in a country of thieveries. One year, beetles hollowed the willow, its whisper of leaves angling in the dark. The girl's mind riots with Revlon's Charlie, the perfume's jade green heft cool against her palm. Cool as black nylons under black denim shorts. In 1994, it's a dog year. Find an architecture for want, paint blistering in a humid storm, walls riot with Wunderkammer in the house I continue to leave. 3. A hibiscus spends at least part of the night describing the moon, a poet writes, and I spend at least the other half describing the girl made of lightning. Girl who separated clusters of fragrant ixora, linking each bloom into one chain. I'm riding away from a girlhood of bruised berries amid the ficus I climbed, an abacus or litany pelting my legs. I lived in a house made of cinder block walls, vinyl albums, and a ghost leopard, the cruel animal skin a hunter gifted. My mother and father, its eyeless head slept through seasons of grass fire, seasons of rain. Let me build a narrative of its presence. A flayed illusion of power. A girl teenager in a lousy heaven is not a garden, but made of white hammock rope, fungal roses, wind grazing corrugated zinc. 4. Here, every flower might be a rose, red ribbon roses on a black hairband, red wing at the edge of a vision. Red fruit remains an argument in a garden of downpour. 5. Because it's easier to pretend I never loved him, because I couldn't have known what love is. In the blue light of archetype, it's difficult to describe loss. I keep the fugitive unknowns in the heart of what if. In the country, I'm always leaving and leaving between cities and oceans. What am I hoping to find? Not the girl that I was, girl with a face like a window, unrelenting, disturbed by all the roses, the oil of flowers, a pink wilderness. Now I'll switch gears and read some of those love poems that Lindsey was doing. Why my poems arrive wearing black gloves. Like twin gauntlets set on the margin, enter the female assassin, screwball debutante. Noir and glitz mixed in one bad throwback to an age when dahlias hold anyone who breathed them. My poems arrive wearing satin or suede to haunt you when they leave no trace. I've watched a man pull off his gloves with his teeth. The trick to undoing the wolf behind the saint is to make a slow-mo invitation of it. Because there's never a plot unless one of us goes missing. That's me at the aerodrome and you boarding a custard plane. Now fly a desultory wind before you vanish. That's the tension we need. I love an overblown image, a drawer full of hands wave in a solemn motorcade. My gloves pantomime moods so thick you could ladle gravy. About my first book, a critic wrote, "I'm a little bored with the aesthetic." If that isn't damning, what is? My poems wear black to turn the dials and bag the ice, and the director's cut from driving the hairpin curve when the camera rolls back to show you looking bouche but alive. You were always in on it. A poem is a diamond heist. Tell the critic no one watches a woman enter a room to look at her hands just like no one's reading this poem to picture my life. Let a black glove peel down the avenue of my arm, what wouldn't you do? The roses. Daily the beatitudes. Phosphorus struck in midnight air. Flame cupped against rain. Dead-headed rose crowned with bees. Daily the cut arrangements, threaded in chain link, yellow tape dividing yesterday's gunfire from today's erasure. The roses are edged with bruises. The roses, American red, absorb the floodlit street. The roses hang night long in their jagged mourning. Scent the air, mottled plum, ask only to open once, prophecy, and die. This next poem draws its inspiration from a painting by William Adolph Foucault. It's called Lady with Glove. Color of ginkgo, maybe citron, puffed sleeves I notice first. Then her sideways acid look, an ungloved hand props up the other gloved hand. Whether she's set to take the lone glove off or roll the missing one on, it's all invitational. Her blank décolletage, picture the coup, the lure of unfinished action. No necklace, no background, except for the black sky or unlit parlor. Who knows where this is happening? I'm doing what history warns us not to, inserting myself in the frame so that her bloodless smile has little to do with neoclassical beauty at the second before or after a crime. She regrets nothing. I regret less and less. In a parable of love, a brute steps into an orchard, doesn't come back. Once, a woman with opaline skin wore a malarial dress, fingers cocked like a gun. Whether she took the lone glove off or rolled the missing one on, the painting is fabling a crosswind in the trees. One last one, Young Lady with Gloves, which is based on a Tamara D'Olympica artwork. Bias cut emerald, so cinched it wraps the model's torso, navel imprinting silk, not to mention white gloves, demure minks, one hand tipping the hat's brim, the other raising her thigh. Perfectly deco, from the architectural shoulder bow to her red lip, nipples rivets on a gunwale. 90 years later, Olympica's pre-war canvas reads money. I wasn't rich, but could pretend when I lived on Fifth, my one good black coat sipped. I was young, though not bombshell blonde, woke to hoarfrost, bus to Oakland for a secretarial job, where the phone rang, barely, and in that late Gothic revival skyscraper arranged books by year. Nothing glamorous, but it paid enough to live alone. When I imagined her muse gazing through what must have been a hotel portico, game for a future where a green dress pools, I think Lembeke felt this certain painting herself in another portrait, steering a Bugatti. In truth, she drove a yellow Renault. For a year, I worked those dead-end rooms that boiled while outside snow blew in the updraft. Left Pittsburgh for a desert suburb, anonymous. Now the model's face turned in shadow, this young woman waiting. It isn't nostalgia nor melancholy I envy, but freedom to choose 100 endings. I'll never know insouciance again. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was awesome. Thank you, Lindsey. Those poems were so beautiful, and I totally loved your collaborations. I'm gonna drop Lindsey and Karen, like links to their books, Lindsey and Karen's books in the chat again in a second here, but I can't do two things at once. So first, let's open it up to questions. I have a question to start off, and then if others have questions, please feel welcome to unmute yourself and ask, or you can type it in the chat if you would rather. Jace, did you want to say anything before I ask a question? No, okay, just want to make sure. So could you just each of you describe how the collaboration worked? Like, did you email each other your books and then like kind of make a collage, or like just like kind of maybe part collage, part your own work? And then yeah, like I also wonder if you've seen each other's poems that you created through the collaboration, or if this is the first time you like heard those. So yeah, whichever of you wants to go first.
I'll go first. First, we started by trading PDFs of each other's books, and we took some time reading them. And then by email, we just kind of had a brief discussion about what drew us to each other's work. I know for me, at first it was how Lindsey's book takes a very specific format. There are blocks of prose poems that kind of contain structure and idealized Plat, if you will. How that tension kind of started revealing a certain wildness even within the work. Even though it looks structured, there's all of this wildlife, there's the roses, there's coyotes. It's really full of so much feeling and openness. And if you look at my own work, it kind of felt like the inverse, where outwardly you might see a lot of exuberance or flashiness in the language or in the topics. But if you dig more deeply, there's a lot that I never actually say. There's a certain privacy to it. So in that sense, it kind of felt a bit different, and that kind of intrigued me. So from there, we kind of just decided that we would draw inspiration from each other's lines. And at a certain point, we showed each other what we were working on, but mostly just so we could choose which poems to be reading. So I'm delighted how it worked out. I was completely surprised by what Lindsey came up with. I hadn't thought to link the gloves to ideas about motherhood and the rhyming and the soundscapes. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know that I have too much to add other than I think another thing that I was really excited about when I read Karen's book was our kind of shared preoccupation with material. And I think in hers, it's a lot of like fabric and sort of like fashion and drape and cut, and there's like a beautiful attention to those textures. And in my work, it's like more about architecture and like plant textures maybe, but but that was kind of a place that I immediately kind of felt an affinity with. And I think that's maybe why the gloves kind of called to me a little bit. Even though I think we were also both like thinking about roses and thinking about femininity and yeah, I would totally agree that the kind of like surprising similarities and differences in voice and in form and in approach and in subject were really freeing and exciting when I was thinking about what I could do with them. And I liked the idea as we kind of started sharing work. I liked the idea of like this being a reading that people would hear as opposed to you know, something that they would, you know, that like a way that you would encounter it on the page, because like that kind of like deja vu sense of like repeating lines from each other, and that kind of like that was something that I started to get really excited by. So I purposely tried to kind of incorporate whole chunks of part of Karen's lines in my poems, in part to kind of have that kind of like resonant effect as she then would go on to read them. And that was very exciting and fun for me to hear.
Amazing. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing that and those experiences. Does anyone else have questions that they would like to ask? Please feel welcome to do that.
Kelly, were you gonna ask a question? Sorry, I just saw your picture
I'm
pop up.
thinking. Sorry, and then I felt like I maybe should come on screen to do my thinking. I mean, I guess but I can sort of do one on the fly a little bit.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Lindsey's point about the material, and also it feels just like both of the readings and the collages specifically also feel interested in a kind of ornamentation that's often classed as feminine. And I'm just curious about, and this is, I apologize to Lindsey because I've asked her this question before elsewhere, but like I do wonder about how big a role ideas of gender are looming for both of you, because it's always sort of a looming question for me, and so maybe I'm hearing it in places where it's not. But I'd be curious to hear just about where gender is coming into this, and potentially how that informed your collaboration even. I mean, I was just so moved by the collaging and the echo. And yeah, so just thank you, I guess, for your reading is maybe my more global comment. Thanks.
I think like one thing that I didn't mention that is another affinity that I at least like found between Karen's and my work is a preoccupation with audience. And Karen, I don't know if you read, I guess your first poem that you read kind of does kind of poke at the reader, kind of gesture towards the reader explicitly. And there are a few poems that do that in my book as well. And I think this, like certainly kind of like I was interested in the rose, for instance, as this kind of like stereotypical kind of like figure in poetic history of like the woman, or a kind of like floral things in general as being kind of like tacked to a certain gender. And I would be really curious to hear what Karen has to say about that, because I think fashion can of course be that way as well. And I'm thinking about it more in terms of like the garden, but it was certainly on my mind as I was like trying to think about how to write. I really did want to write some poems about my experience being pregnant, because I like have not been writing very much about that. And I was like, I probably should try to record some of this. This is a crazy experience. And but also being aware of like, I guess, or maybe being kind of like overly sensitive to some of the ways that pregnancy has been written about, and for better or worse, wanting to lean into and push away from some of those things at the same time. Yeah, sort of, it's on my mind. I guess that's the answer to the question. I don't know that I have more of an answer than that, but yeah.
In terms of gender and language, I think I would say if some of my work comes across as feminine, if you will, it's just coming out of lived experience. It's not something that I consider it's second nature. That's something that I do consider very consciously, is what else I add into a poem that kind of cuts against that. In this case, the roses are there, but the roses are edged bruises. There's, an accompanying darkness or shadow or even violence, if that's not too harsh of a term, that goes along with it. So that it's never entirely, or at least I hope it isn't, a so-called soft or stereotypical type of femininity, but it shows it with more dimension. There's more complexity to it. And that's always fascinated me. So that's how I tend to approach my work.
Thank you, Karen and Lindsey, and thank you, Kelly, for that question. Are there other questions that people have that they'd like to ask?
I have a sort of one kind of emerging, and Kelly was able to get to a question from ideas live, and so I'm gonna follow Kelly's courage. And I'll echo the global sentiment of these comments is probably going to just be like so wonderful to hear both of you and to hear parts of these books and parts of new things. I'm bad. I write my notes elsewhere, and then I'm like, oh, I should have put these in the comment thing. But the one I have in bold, I think, was from you, Lindsey, was "he socks me," coming after all this sort of glove stuff. I just sort of like somehow saw like a sock puppet there, but it's like then again this more like violent line, right? It's sort of like actual physical violence, and there was something. Like I laughed at that part, and then was like my laughter was immediately undercut by the violence, and sort of like I had these complicated feelings. So but the gloves is what I wanted to ask you both about. I think in both of these works, there's a lot of surfaces. There's like the plats and the garden surfaces, which are flat, but of course like have depth. There's film, there's material, and then in both the two lines I pulled from you each, Lindsey, you had a line about a glove as a till in the soil, sort of like an animate glove, and I'm thinking sort of like horror movie hands sort of running around on their own, or like Addams Family and other horror movies, and just sort of like the surrealism of like an animate glove, or maybe like a latent surrealism and just sort of an abandoned glove. And then, so that was sort of circling my mind when Karen, you hit the line, "a drawer full of hands wave." And so I'm wondering if I could just sort of ask you to both to talk about like surfaces, touch, gloves, and reading, if that's not too like sort of broad of a prompt. These are just like the things that were sort of sticking out to me, and I'm wondering how those things are striking you in these works.
I think I need a minute to think, Karen, if you want to start.
Question feels very profound, and I'm not entirely sure how to approach it. But in terms of loves in general in the book, I think what attracted me to that is that they can mean so many different things. They can have that kind of eeriness, like you're kind of touching on, but they can also be very elegant. You think of the opera glove. I'm not sure how to describe it. It's just an image that is almost a kind of stand-in for a masquerade. There is a kind of hiddenness to it. And what happens once you remove a glove, that's interesting to me also. But maybe it's just something that we just have to appreciate as it's. I'll hand it over to Lindsey.
Yeah. I love being handed the glove question. That's good. I mean, I think there's something very, as you said, sort of spooky about the abandoned glove or the like removed glove. It feels so close to the skin in a way that some other articles of clothing don't seem to, because it's so like contoured and it's so precise in the way that it has to fit the hand, which is a strange shape. That like if you see an abandoned glove on the street, it all like for me it almost feels like too, like I would never, like almost like a sense of like too, like almost revulsion to put the idea of like putting my hand in that abandoned glove, because it is like so, it has been so close to another person's skin in that way. And so that I think was maybe one of the first, beyond all the kind of like sort of performative aspects of like wearing gloves, I think that kind of essential spookiness and closeness of the glove as an object was one thing that I was really interested in, that kind of like inherent intimacy of just the construction of that particular garment. That's just sort of baked into that structure. And so, yeah, I think the idea of like a surface in that way, like skin, that you could sort of just take off and could go have a life outside of your skin, even though it was made for you, or feels like it was made for you. It feels strange.
Thank you both. I mean, you know, however, whatever I sort of managed to sort of send out in a garbled fashion, I think that you both just sort of gave a brilliant sort of dissertation on gloves in poetry. So thank you so much. Any questions now sparked? We can keep going on gloves. You can do a follow-up question with gloves. There's a lot going on in the chat. No one said the gloves come off yet, which is like a phrase that means it's going down, right? If the gloves come off, it's a fight, or it's a fight, even more serious stage of what was already a fight. Okay.
It's no longer polite. It's
Okay.
no longer polite fighting.
Okay, so it wouldn't be boxing then, though. More like pre-duel language.
I would think that boxing gloves feel very I mean, I'm not a boxer, but the
Yeah.
boxing gloves feel very padded, and I think that
Yeah.
once you take that off, you have a firmer structure with
Okay.
which to hit somebody.
Okay, I'll have to review the Rocky films to maybe fully understand the metaphor in this new light. So sorry for taking over. Does anyone have any questions? They don't have to be about gloves. Just further glove talk in the chat. We can leave the chat open for a couple minutes so as to not cut off the glove chat. But I think that each of your glove brilliance is a good place as any to close out. So I do want to reiterate, thank you both, Karen and Lindsey. Thanks to Danica for the paintings too. I felt like especially Lady with Glove was so amazing to see and hear Karen at the same time. We don't have our next iteration scheduled, but it will come definitely. So thanks everyone for coming. This was a blast. and I'm looking forward to the next one whenever it comes. Danica, anything to close?
No, I don't think so. Just thank you so, so much to Karen and Lindsey. That was super beautiful. Thank you all for coming. Please buy Karen and Lindsey's books. And yeah, in the fall sometime, it's Copperhead season 5. Will be Joe Hall and Jake Reber, which will be fun. But thank you very much. I hope everyone has a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Dallin could have hung out in the secret after party. Maybe he's in fact quite nearby though.
He's just in the other room.
Yes, thank you so much, both of you. Here, I'll stop the recording at this natural spot to do so.